Justice Kavanaugh?
Just on the data collection interest, I think Congress and the President were concerned that China was accessing information about millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, including teenagers, people in their 20s, that they would use that information over time to develop spies, to turn people, to blackmail people, people who a generation from now will be working in the FBI or the CIA or in the State Department. Is that not a realistic assessment by Congress and the President of the risks here?
Well, Your Honor, I'm not disputing the risks. I'm disputing the means that they have chosen. One way, the most direct way to address that, all of this user data sits on data servers in Virginia controlled by Oracle. I'm not talking about the National Security Agreement. What I'm talking about is a law that simply says to TikTok Incorporated and its U.S. employees, you cannot share that user data with anybody. You can't give it to ByteDance. You can't give it to China. You can't give it to Google. You can't give it to Amazon. You cannot give it to anybody under threat of massive penalties. They never even considered that most obvious alternative. And so whether you apply intermediate scrutiny or strict scrutiny, it's not a least restrictive means test, but you got to at least consider the most obvious alternative.
So you acknowledge the risk that Congress and the President were concerned about. You're just saying the means they chose to address that risk were incorrect,
so
not permissible.
I certainly acknowledge the risk, but I think there are lots of reasons, not just the one I just gave, but there are lots of reasons why that risk still can't justify the law. When it sits alongside of the impermissible covert manipulation risk, I think it falls under Mount Healthy. It's no different if they came in and said, we passed this law, one for data security.
I understand that, but just on the data collection, that seems like a huge concern for the future of the country.
And Your Honor, again, it is a concern, two responses. First, it is a concern that can be addressed directly. The reason why there's no evidence in this record about whether that kind of direct prohibition on TikTok Incorporated from sharing sensitive user data with anybody, including ByteDance, the reason why the record is devoid of any evidence of that is because Congress never considered the other side of the balance. And that's the minimum that Congress has to do under the First Amendment. It's got to at least consider the consequences of shutting down a speech platform used by 170 million Americans against the benefits of an alternative, like simply saying to TikTok's employees, you're essentially going to get massive fines, potentially jail sentences, if you share any of that sensitive user data with anybody. Not TikTok, not ByteDance, not China, not anybody else in the world. Yet there's nothing in this record that suggests they even considered that alternative.
What happens after January 19th if you lose this case? Can you just spell that out?
At least as I understand it, we go dark.